Hi, everybody. I'm Stacy Beasley, and today I'm going to teach you about writing in the social sciences. So when we write in the social sciences, we use in-text citations and we reference and references and as a part of APA formatting. So what is APA formatting? APA formatting is a style of documentation of sources used by the American Psychological Association. And so other social sciences use this, like psychology, sociology, anthropology, just to name a few. When you go to write a report or write an essay or write an assignment, you use APA. Sometimes people will use MLA. However, I'm teaching you about APA. And so, professionals and students use APA, and you use it to indicate where you learned the information. And when you're citing an APA, you cite within the body of your written work an in-text citation. And then at the end of your paper, you'll have a references section where you give the full reference. Why do we do this? To give credit to the original author and to inform the reader where they can view more. When? Anytime you write a report. Whether it's an essay or an assignment or even on a discussion board, it's always an appropriate time to give credit to the original author. So what you're looking at here is a student essay that's an example that's given at the OWL at Purdue website. And so if you see here at the top, it says here, according to Thiel is the author, the last name of the author of a body of work. 2017 is the year published, and they make a statement that's a direct quote. And at the end of the quote, they have an end quote here and it has the page number. So whenever you use somebody else's work to make a statement in your work, you're going to reference where you learned it. If it's a direct quote, you have the quotations here and here and the page number along with the year published and at least the last name of the author. So if you're reading a report like this one from the FBI, 2019 crime in the United States, human trafficking. So, this is found on the U.S. Department of Justice website. And so after reading this, you're able to make some statements that are true. And so some of the statements I made here are, according to the U.S. Department of Justice in 2019 report on human trafficking, there were 48 of 50 states that reported to the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation on human trafficking. So that's giving credit where credit is due. Where did I learn the information from? This other statement here is very similar. In 2019, there were 1,883 incidents of human trafficking in the United States. And that's according to the US DOJ 2019. And then in the reference section, there'll be a full reference. So, here's the sample from the reference. So in order to write the reference, you would put the name of the agency, the year it was published, the title, and if there's a subtitle, if there's a report number, you'd put that as well, and the publisher. So you can see here, the United States Department of Justice, 2019, crime in the United States, human trafficking, retrieved from, and because it was published on a website, I pulled the web address. If you have an article, a peer-reviewed scholarly journal article, to the right here is the American Sociological Review. It is a journal, a peer-reviewed journal. And so inside you see the table of contents. The very first one here is the one I'm going to be using: getting in, getting hired, getting sideways looks, organizational hierarchy, and the perceptions of racial discrimination. And then this picture here below is the first page of the article, which is page 31. So here I wrote out the journal is the American Sociological Review, the article and the title. And then if I were to cite this, I read it and I summarized what I learned in there, I would cite within the body of my work the author's last names. And so in parentheses, I put here Wingfield and Chavez, those are the author's last names, comma, 2020, because that is the year it's published, end parentheses. So if I was to write in my paper, I could write something like, according to Wingfield and Chavez in 2020, blah, 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 whatever the statement is. And then if I wanted to use a direct quote, meaning I found something there in their article that I really liked, and I thought it couldn't be reworded, and I would have to use that as a quote. You write out the entire portion that you want to use as the quotation. And at the end, you have a parentheses, the author's last names, comma, the year it's published, and then the page number, your end of the parentheses, and then your punctuation point. If you're looking at a book, an academic book, and this is the example I'm using is from Robert N. Bella, who wrote Religion and Human Evolution from the Paleolithic to the Axial Age. And you can see here, the year it was published is 2017. So right here, the copyright page is usually the second, maybe third page of the book when you open it up. At the top here, it shows copyright 2011. However, the book that I have is not, is a softbound book. It's a paperback. And so if you look down to where it says First Harvard University Press paperback edition, it got cut off here, but it says 2017, and then it's a third printing. So here's the publisher information. First Harvard University Press. The in-text citation would just be simply Bella 2017. And so if you're using a quote, here's the quotation here. Use a parentheses, author's last name, year, page number, and it should be end parentheses, then your punctuation points. There's a kind of an error right here. You'd want to switch those. Okay. In your reference section, this is where you put your full citation. So a reference page is usually the last page of the report, essays, or project. In this section, you list all the works mentioned in your paper to include films, lectures, presentations, articles, and books. So the word references should be centered at the very top of the page on its own piece of paper. It doesn't share any other, like you don't finish the essay and maybe in the middle of the page, and in order to save room, you just start into your reference section. No, that is not correct. You would start references on the very next page. So the references are listed alphabetically by the author's last name. And so you can see that they have listed all the author's last name. So this example comes from the OWL at Purdue. If you just Google OWL at Purdue and student example of APA, this will definitely come up, and here's the web address where you can go if you'd like to. So we do all of these things in order to avoid plagiarism and to give credit where credit is due and to share information. So plagiarism is representing somebody else's words or ideas as one's own without giving credit to the original author. Plagiarism can be done intentionally or unintentionally. So prior to getting this lesson on APA citations and references, one could argue that it was unintentional, that you didn't understand how to do it correctly and that you didn't mean to. However, after getting this lesson, now you know what APA is and how to format it and give credit to others when you have learned from their ideas. And so now you are responsible for making sure that you give credit where credit is due. So students can receive a 0 grade for an assignment or have participation grades reduced, fail a class, be reprimanded by the college, or be on academic probation, or can be dismissed from the college as a result, as a consequence of plagiarism. So a researcher can lose grants, can be fired, can be reprimanded from the college, or lose credibility. And there may be legal consequences depending on what kind of behavior they were involved in. A professional in the field or an employee can be reprimanded by an employer, fired, and perhaps also have legal consequences. So it's really important that you learn at this stage, how to give credit where credit is due and have those citations. So just to kind of review again, your in-text citations, if you're paraphrasing or rewriting your own words, the real simple way to avoid plagiarism is to simply just give credit by using the author's last name and the year published. And if you're using a direct quote, you use the author's last name, comma, the year published, and then the page number. And you've just avoided plagiarism, which is a wonderful thing. And so, some of the resources for you if you ever have questions or you want to know more about something. Of course, your instructor, am available to you. You can email me or we can make a Zoom appointment. I'm only an email away. You can also access the college library. You can walk in, you can make a telephone call, you could chat with a librarian or an email. And then of course, the OWL at Purdue University's website is an excellent resource. And finally, just want to remind you that, part of student values is that to teach students the right way of doing things. So students come first. We have respect for all. We're community engaged. We collaborate. We're data informed. And finally, we have a can-do spirit. So you all can do this. If you have any questions, I'm available to you. And thank you. Have a nice day.